The cries of a newborn echoed through the small hut as Margaret lay weak and exhausted on the mat. The village midwife, an elderly woman named Mama Esther, wrapped the tiny baby in a worn cloth and handed her to Margaret. "It's a girl," Mama Esther said, smiling warmly. "A beautiful one." Margaret weakly lifted her head to look at her baby, but the joy that should have filled her heart was absent. Something was wrong. The baby wasn't looking at her. She wasn't responding to movement. Mama Esther gently waved her hand in front of the child's face, then sighed deeply. She does not see," Mama Esther said. Margaret's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "Your daughter is blind, Margaret." Margaret felt the air leave her lungs. She stared at the baby in her arms, her tiny face innocent, her hands moving aimlessly. A heavy silence filled the hut. Outside, the village women waited, eager to hear the news, but Margaret could already hear the whispers that would spread like wildfire. A cursed child. A bad omen. Who will marry a blind girl? She will bring suffering to her mother. Margaret clenched her teeth, her body trembling with fear. The father of the baby had died months ago. Now she was alone, and the world was about to turn its back on her. That night, as the baby cried softly beside her, Margaret made a decision. A decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The moon was high in the sky as Margaret walked through the thick forest. Her heart pounded with every step. The sound of crickets and distant howls filled the air, but she kept moving. In her arms, the tiny baby whimpered. Margaret stopped near an old tree, looking around as if hoping someone would stop her. But no one was there, only the shadows of the night. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt and placed the baby on a soft patch of grass. "I'm sorry," she whispered, choking on her own words. I can't do this." She turned away, squeezing her eyes shut. The baby's cries grew louder. Margaret's feet felt like stone, refusing to move. "Just walk away," she told herself. "Someone will find her. Someone will take care of her." But deep inside, she knew the truth. No one came to this part of the forest. With one last look at her daughter, Margaret ran. She ran without looking back. She ran, leaving behind the one soul that needed her the most. The baby's cries pierced through the silence of the forest, echoing in the night. Somewhere nearby, a man on horseback slowed down. Dr. Samuel was on his way back from a village where he had treated sick children. He was tired, but the sound of a crying child stopped him in his tracks. He listened for a moment, then turned his horse toward the sound. As he reached a large tree, he spotted something on the ground, a tiny bundle wrapped in cloth. His heart clenched. He jumped off his horse and hurried forward. Gently, he picked up the baby, his experienced hands recognizing weakness and hunger. "Who would leave you here, little one?" he whispered, rocking her gently. The baby stopped crying for a moment, as if sensing kindness. Dr. Samuel sighed deeply. He couldn't leave her here. He couldn't ignore the call of fate. Holding the baby close, he climbed back onto his horse and rode into the night. Dr. Samuel arrived home just before dawn. His wife Mary sat by the fire waiting for him. The moment she saw the baby in his arms, her eyes widened. "Samuel, whose child is this?" she asked, rushing toward him. He sighed, shaking his head. She was abandoned in the forest. Someone left her to die. Mary gasped, placing a hand over her mouth. Samuel gently placed the baby in Mary's arms. "She needs us." Mary looked down at the tiny face, her heart melting. "She's beautiful." Samuel smiled. "I want to call her Grace, because despite everything, she has survived." Tears filled Mary's eyes. "Grace Light," she whispered, "she will bring light into our lives." That night, Grace slept in a warm home, surrounded by love. Years passed, and Grace grew up under the love and care of Dr. Samuel and Mary. Though she was blind, she never let it define her. She learned to use her hands to feel the world, her ears to hear what others ignored, and her heart to understand what sight could not show. "Grace," Mary called one morning as the little girl played in the yard. "Come inside, my dear." Grace turned her head toward the sound, smiling brightly. She had memorized every part of the house and walked confidently inside. "You called, Mama?" she asked, feeling for Mary's hands. Mary held her tiny fingers, squeezing them gently. "I have something for you." She placed a small wooden flute in Grace's hands. "I want you to learn how to play this." Grace felt the smooth wood, curiosity lighting up her face. "Music?" "Yes," Mary said. "Music can be seen with the heart, not just the eyes." That day, Grace sat outside, pressing the flute to her lips. At first, the sounds were broken and sharp, but as the days passed, she learned. Soon, the sweet sound of her flute floated through the air, touching the hearts of everyone who listened. One evening, as Dr. Samuel watched Grace play, a thought crossed his mind. What if she can see? He had treated many patients, but Grace's blindness was something he had never fully examined. That night, he spent hours reading old medical books, searching for answers. The next day, he took Grace to his clinic and conducted several tests. His hands shook as he went through the results. "There is hope," he whispered. Grace's blindness wasn't permanent. A surgery could restore her sight. But the surgery was expensive. Still, Dr. Samuel made a decision. No matter what, he would find a way to give Grace the gift of sight, even if it took everything he had. Dr. Samuel sat in his clinic, staring at the test results. His heart pounded with hope and fear. Grace's blindness was not a curse. It could be reversed with a delicate surgery. But the cost was high. He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. He had saved many lives in his years as a doctor, but this time it was different. This was his daughter, the little girl who had brought light into his life. Mary walked in and saw the worry on his face. "What is it, Samuel?" she asked. He looked at her and sighed. "Grace can see again, Mary, but the surgery is expensive. We don't have that kind of money." Mary's eyes filled with tears. She sat beside him, gripping his hands. "Then we will find a way. Grace deserves this chance." Samuel nodded. "I will sell the clinic if I have to." Mary gasped. "But this clinic is your life." He smiled sadly. "Grace is my life." That night, Samuel went out in search of funds. He asked for loans, spoke to friends, and even considered selling his home. But the money was still not enough. One day, he received an unexpected visitor, a wealthy businessman named Mr. Benson, who had once been his patient. "I hear you need money, doctor," Mr. Benson said, leaning forward. "How much?" Samuel hesitated before answering. Mr. Benson smiled. "I owe you my life. I will pay for the surgery." Samuel's eyes widened. You will?" "Yes. You saved me once. Let me do the same for your daughter." Tears rolled down Samuel's face as he gripped Mr. Benson's hands. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Hope had finally come. The hospital room was filled with tension. Grace lay on the bed, her tiny fingers gripping Mary's hand. "Mama, will it hurt?" she asked softly. Mary kissed her forehead. "No, my love, you will sleep, and when you wake up, you will see the world." Grace's lips trembled. "And I will see you." Mary's heart clenched. "Yes, my child, you will see me." Dr. Samuel walked in, his face masked with confidence, though his heart pounded with fear. He knew the risks. Any mistake could change Grace's life forever. But he had to try. The nurses wheeled Grace into the operating room. Samuel followed, whispering a silent prayer. Hours passed. Mary sat in the waiting area, gripping her rosary, her eyes red from crying. Finally, the doors opened. Dr. Samuel stepped out, his face unreadable. Mary rushed to him. "Samuel, tell me." He took a deep breath, then smiled. The surgery was successful. Mary collapsed into his arms, sobbing with relief. 2 days later, it was time to remove Grace's bandages. Dr. Samuel and Mary stood by her bedside as the nurse gently unwrapped the white cloth around her eyes. Grace blinked. Her breathing quickened. "Grace, can you see me?" Samuel asked, his voice shaking. Grace looked up, her dark brown eyes scanning the room. Slowly, a smile stretched across her lips. "Mama, Papa, I see you." Mary burst into tears, hugging her daughter tightly. Grace's eyes widened as she saw her reflection in the mirror for the first time. "This is me," she whispered. "Yes, my love," Mary said, stroking her hair. "This is you." Tears filled Grace's eyes. She turned to Samuel and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Papa." For the first time in her life, she saw the man who had saved her, the man who had given her a second chance at life. and for the first time, Samuel saw the eyes of the daughter he had chosen to love. Far away in a small village, Margaret sat outside her hut, staring at the sunset. Her hands rested on her stomach, empty, lifeless. For years, she had tried to have more children. She had visited every healer, every priest, every doctor. But nothing worked. "Why, God," she whispered, "why did you take my children from me?" A deep voice behind her spoke. "Maybe because you abandoned the one he gave you." Margaret turned sharply. It was Mama Esther, the village midwife. "You think I don't know what you did?" Mama Esther continued. "You left that child to die, and now you cry for children." Margaret trembled. "I was scared. I was alone." "You were selfish," Mama Esther spat, "and now the gods have punished you." Margaret burst into tears. She fell to her knees, gripping the earth. "I want her back," she sobbed. "I need to find her." Mama Esther scoffed. "It's been years. Do you even know where she is?" Margaret looked up, determination flashing in her eyes. "I will find her, even if it takes my whole life." Margaret sold her belongings and left the village. She traveled from town to town, asking about a blind girl who was abandoned years ago. Most people laughed at her, others shook their heads in pity. But she kept searching. One day in a busy market, she overheard a woman talking. "Do you know the famous doctor who adopted a blind girl?" Margaret's heart pounded. She turned to the woman. "Where?" she asked desperately. "Where is this doctor?" The woman replied. "In the city. His name is Dr. Samuel. The girl is not blind anymore. She had surgery." Margaret's knees went weak. Her daughter was alive, and she could see. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Grace, my Grace." She arrived in the city, exhausted and hungry, stood outside the clinic, her heart pounding. Her legs ached from days of walking, but nothing mattered more than what lay ahead. She took a deep breath and stepped through the door. A young nurse at the front desk looked up. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I help you?" Margaret swallowed hard, her throat dry. I need to see Dr. Samuel." The nurse frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" Margaret shook her head. "Please, it's important. Tell him it's about his daughter." The nurse hesitated, then sighed. "Wait here." Margaret stood still, gripping the edge of her wrapper. She had rehearsed this moment in her head over and over. She would kneel, beg, cry if she had to. She had made a terrible mistake years ago, but she was here now. She was ready to make it right. Minutes later, the door opened, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. His face was serious, his eyes sharp and full of wisdom. "Dr. Samuel." Margaret's heart clenched as she looked at the man who had raised her child. "You are the woman who wanted to see me?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Margaret nodded quickly. "Yes, doctor. Please, we need to talk." Dr. Samuel folded his arms. "Make it quick. I have patients to attend to." Margaret's lips trembled. She fell to her knees. "Please, doctor, I am here for my daughter." Dr. Samuel's expression didn't change. "Your daughter." Margaret wiped her tears. "Grace, she is my child. I am her mother." For a moment there was silence. Then Dr. Samuel threw back his head and laughed. Margaret froze. It was not the reaction she expected. His laughter was bitter, mocking, and filled with disbelief. "You must be a foolish woman," he said, his voice turning cold. "You abandoned a helpless baby in the forest, like an animal. And now you think you can walk in here and claim my beautiful daughter." Margaret's face crumpled with shame. "Doctor, I was young. I was scared. I made a mistake." Dr. Samuel's eyes darkened. "A mistake? You left her to die. And now that she has grown into a strong, intelligent, and wonderful young woman, you suddenly remember you're her mother." Margaret wept. "Please, doctor, let me see her. Let me tell her the truth. I want to take her home." Dr. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "You must be crazy." His voice was sharp like a knife. "Grace is already home. She has a family, a mother, and a father who love her. She doesn't know you, and she doesn't need you." Margaret sobbed. "She deserves to know who I am." Dr. Samuel took a step closer, his face filled with anger. "If you ever come near my daughter again, I will call the police. Now get out." Margaret's heart shattered. She opened her mouth to plead again, but Dr. Samuel pointed at the door. "Out!" he thundered. Tears poured down her face as she staggered to her feet and stumbled toward the door. Before stepping out, she turned to look at him one last time. "Doctor, one day she will know the truth, and when she does, I pray she forgives me." Dr. Samuel didn't answer. He just watched her leave, his heart burning with anger. As Margaret disappeared into the street, he exhaled deeply. He had protected Grace all these years, and he was not about to let the woman who abandoned her destroy her life again. Dr. Samuel walked into his home, his face tight with anger. He dropped his bag on the chair and sighed heavily. Mary, who was setting the table for dinner, immediately noticed his troubled expression. "Samuel," she called softly, walking towards him. "What's wrong?" He sat down, rubbing his forehead. "She came." Mary frowned. "Who?" Dr. Samuel lifted his head, his jaw clenched. "Grace's biological mother, the woman who abandoned her in the forest." Mary's hands trembled. She sat down beside him, her heart pounding. "Oh, Samuel, I knew this day would come," Dr. Samuel scoffed. "The audacity." She fell on her knees, begging me to let her take Grace back. Mary gasped, gripping her husband's hand. "Take Grace? No, she's our daughter, Samuel. She brought so much joy into my life. I can't lose her." Dr. Samuel turned to her, his eyes softening. He placed his hands over hers. "Don't worry, Mary, we won't lose her. I will never let that woman take Grace away from us." Mary sighed, tears welling in her eyes. "But what if one day Grace wants to know her? What if she asks questions?" Dr. Samuel shook his head. "We raised her with love. She will understand that we are her real family." Unknown to them, Grace was standing by the staircase, hidden behind the wall. She had been on her way downstairs when she heard her parents speaking. At first, she was confused. But as she listened, her entire world shattered. Her breath hitched. She covered her mouth with her hands to stop a sob from escaping. She wasn't their real daughter. She wasn't their flesh and blood. She had been abandoned. Tears streamed down her face as she backed away, her heart breaking into pieces. Her whole life had been a lie. Grace locked herself in her room, her body shaking with silent sobs. The memories of her childhood flashed through her mind. The warm hugs from Mama, the bedtime stories from Papa, the way they always made her feel special. But now, she felt like a stranger in her own home. Her mind raced with questions. Who is my real mother? Why did she abandon me? Why didn't Papa and Mama tell me the truth? She pressed her pillow against her face and cried harder. The pain was unbearable. The parents she had loved all her life weren't really hers. She wasn't Grace Light. She was a child that had been thrown away like garbage. The night dragged on, and Grace lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A storm raged in her heart. She loved Dr. Samuel and Mary, but now she didn't know who she was anymore. By morning, her decision was made. She needed to find the woman who gave birth to her. Even if it meant walking into more pain, she had to know the truth. The morning sun streamed through the windows, but the house felt cold. Mary moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, but something felt off. Usually by this time, Grace would be downstairs, playing her favorite morning tunes on the piano or humming as she helped set the table. But today, silence filled the air. Mary frowned. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked up the stairs. She knocked gently on Grace's door. "My love, are you awake?" No response. She knocked again. "Grace, it's almost 10 a.m. You haven't eaten. Are you okay?" Then a sharp, angry voice came from inside. "Go away." Mary froze. That was not her Grace's voice. That was a voice filled with pain. "Grace, my child, what's wrong?" she asked, her heart pounding. "You are a liar," Grace shouted. "Both you and Papa are liars. I don't want to see you." Mary gasped. She placed her palm against the door, feeling her chest tighten. "Grace, what are you talking about? Open the door so we can talk." "No," Grace yelled. "I can't stay with liars. You are not my real parents." Mary's breath caught in her throat. She staggered back, her hands shaking. Grace knew. "But how?" "Grace, please let me explain." "I don't want to hear anything from you," Grace cried. "Just leave me alone." Tears filled Mary's eyes. She had never heard such anger from Grace before. It was like a dagger to her heart. Realizing that Grace was not going to open the door, Mary turned and rushed downstairs. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone and dialed her husband's number. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Mary, what's wrong?" Dr. Samuel's voice was calm, but she could hear the concern in it. Mary swallowed hard. "Samuel, it's Grace. She's acting strange. She locked herself in her room, she hasn't eaten, and she just called us liars." There was silence on the other end. Then Dr. Samuel's voice turned sharp. "She knows," Mary sobbed. "I don't know how, but she knows the truth. She refuses to talk to me. She won't even open the door." Dr. Samuel took a deep breath. "Stay there. I'm coming home right now." Mary hung up the phone and collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Her worst fear had come true. Grace had found out the truth, and now she might never see them as her parents again. Dr. Samuel drove like a madman, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. His mind raced with thoughts. How did Grace find out? Who told her? He had always wanted to tell her when she was older, when she was ready. But now the truth had come out the wrong way. His heart ached at the thought of losing her. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway and jumped out of the car. He ran into the house where Mary was sitting, her face buried in her hands. "Where is she?" he asked breathlessly. Mary sniffed, wiping her tears. "Still in her room. She won't talk to me." Dr. Samuel's jaw tightened. He marched up the stairs and stopped in front of Grace's door. He knocked, his voice firm but gentle. "Grace, open the door." No response. He knocked again. "It's Papa. Open the door, my love. Let's talk." "Go away." Dr. Samuel closed his eyes, pain slicing through him. "Grace, please listen to me," he said softly. "I know you're hurting, but locking yourself away won't change anything." "I trusted you," Grace cried from inside. "I loved you, and you lied to me." Dr. Samuel rested his forehead against the door. "We didn't lie to you, my child. We protected you. We loved you. We still love you." "Then why didn't you tell me the truth?" Grace's voice broke. Tears filled Dr. Samuel's eyes. "Because we didn't want you to feel unwanted. We didn't want you to carry the pain of being abandoned." Silence. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of Grace's quiet sobs. Dr. Samuel turned to Mary, who stood behind him, her hands clasped together in silent prayer. "She needs time," Mary whispered. Dr. Samuel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. They had given Grace everything: love, care, a home. But now she had to decide whether to keep them in her heart, or push them away forever. Dr. Samuel sat in his office, staring at the documents on his desk, but his mind was far away. He hadn't slept all night, his heart weighed down with fear. Would Grace ever forgive them? Would she ever look at him and Mary the same way again? He had spent years saving lives, healing the sick, and bringing hope to others, but right now he felt powerless. What if he lost the one person who meant the most to him? A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his voice low. The door creaked open, and when he looked up, his breath caught. It was Grace. She stepped inside, her face calm but her eyes red from crying. Dr. Samuel quickly stood up, his heart racing. "Grace." She walked towards him slowly, then stopped in front of his desk. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, thick with emotions too deep for words. Then Grace took a deep breath and looked him in the eyes. "I have forgiven you and Mama," she said softly. Dr. Samuel's lips parted, his eyes widening. You have." Grace nodded, her voice steady. "Yes. You and Mama are my parents. You raised me. You loved me. You gave me everything. And no matter what, you will always be my parents." Dr. Samuel felt his chest tighten. His legs felt weak, and he had to grip the desk to steady himself. Grace stepped closer, her voice breaking with emotion. "I will never go back to my biological mother, Daddy. Never." Tears spilled down Dr. Samuel's face as he rushed forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Thank you, my baby," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Thank you for forgiving us." Grace wrapped her arms around him, her own tears falling freely. "I love you, Daddy," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I don't care where I came from. You and Mama are my real family." Dr. Samuel kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "And I love you, my child. So much. I don't want to lose you." Grace pulled back slightly and wiped his tears with her small hands. "You will never lose me, Daddy. Never." Dr. Samuel smiled through his tears and hugged her again. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the woman who abandoned her. All that mattered was the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And no one would ever take that away. 2 days had passed since Grace forgave Dr. Samuel and Mary, but the storm was far from over. Dr. Samuel was in his office, attending to a patient, when his secretary rushed in, her face pale with worry. "Doctor, there's a woman outside demanding to see you," she said breathlessly. Dr. Samuel sighed. "Tell her I'm busy." The secretary hesitated. "Sir, she's shouting. People are gathering outside." Dr. Samuel frowned. "Who is this woman?" Before the secretary could answer, a loud voice echoed from the hallway. "Dr. Samuel, you thief, you stole my baby." Dr. Samuel's blood ran cold. He stood up just as the door burst open and Margaret stormed in, her face red with rage. "You," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at him, "you think you can take what is mine and get away with it?" Dr. Samuel's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" Margaret scoffed, folding her arms. "You stole my child, you kidnapped her, and now you pretend to be a saint. You and your wife are terrible people." Dr. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "Are you out of your mind?" he said sharply. "You abandoned a helpless baby in the forest like trash, and now you have the audacity to come here and call me a thief." Margaret stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "I am her mother. I gave birth to her. You had no right to take her." Dr. Samuel let out a bitter laugh. "No right. No right to save her from death. No right to give her a home. Tell me, woman, where were you when she cried for food? Where were you when she needed love? Where were you when she was blind and helpless?" Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dr. Samuel shook his head in disgust. "You should be ashamed of yourself." Margaret's hands trembled. "You had no right to raise her without my permission." Dr. Samuel slammed his hand on the desk, making her flinch. "And you had no right to bring her into this world, only to throw her away." The room fell silent. The anger in Dr. Samuel's eyes burned through her like fire. Margaret took a shaky breath and pointed at him again. "I will tell the whole world about you. Everyone will know that you and your wife stole my child." Dr. Samuel smiled. "Go ahead, tell them. And while you're at it, tell them how you left your own flesh and blood to die alone in the forest. Tell them how you were too much of a coward to face your responsibility." Margaret's lips quivered, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "I will get my daughter back," she hissed. Dr. Samuel's face darkened. "Today should be the last time you ever step into my office. If you ever come near my family again, I will make sure you are locked up for child abandonment." Margaret's eyes widened. You wouldn't dare." Dr. Samuel leaned forward. "Try me." Margaret's breath hitched. She knew he had the power to do it. Her pride was shattered, but she refused to show weakness. She turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Dr. Samuel sat down heavily, his body trembling with anger. He knew this wasn't over. Margaret wasn't going to give up. And that meant the battle for Grace's future had only just begun. That evening, Dr. Samuel walked into his home, his face still tense from the encounter with Margaret. He removed his coat and sat heavily on the couch, rubbing his temples. Mary, who had been in the kitchen, noticed his troubled expression and quickly walked over. "Samuel, what is it?" she asked, sitting beside him. He exhaled deeply. "She came back, Mary. That woman came to my office again." Mary's eyes widened. "Margaret? What did she say this time?" Dr. Samuel shook his head, his anger still simmering. "She caused a scene in front of my patients, screaming that I stole her child. She even threatened to tell the whole world that we kidnapped Grace." Mary gasped, placing a hand over her chest. "What? After all we've done for that girl, how dare she?" Dr. Samuel nodded. "She's determined to take Grace away, and I won't let that happen. That woman abandoned her in the forest. She has no right to call herself a mother now." Mary's heart pounded. She couldn't imagine losing Grace. The thought alone sent shivers down her spine. She grabbed Samuel's hands and looked him in the eyes. "Samuel, we need to go to the police. We legally adopted Grace when we found her." We have documents to prove it. If Margaret tries anything, we must be prepared." Dr. Samuel thought for a moment and then nodded. "You're right. We can't take any chances." The next morning, Dr. Samuel went to the police station. He explained everything: the night they found Grace in the forest, the legal adoption, the love and care they had given her, and how Margaret had suddenly returned, demanding her back. The officer in charge, a tall man named Inspector Collins, listened carefully, nodding as he jotted down notes. "You did the right thing by coming here, Doctor," Inspector Collins said. "According to the law, Margaret has no claim over the child. She abandoned her, and you legally adopted her. If she causes any more trouble, call us immediately." Dr. Samuel sighed in relief. "Thank you, Inspector. I just want to protect my daughter." The officer patted his shoulder. "We will handle it, Doctor. You've given that girl a good life. No one can take that away from you." Dr. Samuel left the station feeling a little lighter. Now all he had to do was wait and see if Margaret would come back. A week later, Dr. Samuel was in his office when his secretary entered, looking uneasy. "Doctor, she's here again." Dr. Samuel's body tensed. "Margaret?" The secretary nodded. "Yes, but she seems different. She's not shouting this time." Dr. Samuel frowned, standing up. He took a deep breath and walked out to the waiting area. Margaret stood there, her posture tense, but her eyes were not filled with anger this time. There was something else in them. Pain. Regret. Dr. Samuel folded his arms. "What do you want this time?" Margaret took a shaky breath. Then, to his surprise, she fell to her knees. "Doctor, I beg you, please forgive me," she whispered. Dr. Samuel stiffened. He had expected another fight, more threats. But this was unexpected. He stared at the woman before him, the same woman who had once called him a thief, who had threatened to take Grace away. "Why should I forgive you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Margaret wiped her tears. "I have thought about everything, and I realize that making peace is the best thing to do. I was wrong. I should never have abandoned my daughter, but please believe me when I say I didn't do it because I didn't love her." Dr. Samuel narrowed his eyes. "Then why?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Because of the mockery, the shame." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. "When Grace was born blind, my village turned against me. They called me the mother of a cursed child. Everywhere I went, I heard whispers. I saw the pity in their eyes. No man wanted to marry me, no one wanted to help me. They all said I was doomed." Tears streamed down her face. "I was young and scared. I thought if I abandoned her, my life would be better. I thought I could start over. But I was wrong, Doctor. So wrong." Dr. Samuel listened in silence, his emotions warring within him. Margaret clasped her hands together. "I don't want to take Grace from you. I know now that she belongs with you. I just want a chance to see her, to tell her that I'm sorry, to beg for her forgiveness." Dr. Samuel looked at the broken woman before him. He thought of the girl he had raised, the love he had poured into her, the battles he had fought to keep her safe. And then he thought of this woman, the mother who had given her life, yet abandoned her in fear. He sighed heavily. "Stand up, Margaret," he said softly. Margaret looked up in surprise. Slowly she stood, wiping her eyes. Dr. Samuel met her gaze. "I will forgive you, not for your sake, but for Grace's. But whether she forgives you or not, that is her choice to make." Margaret nodded quickly. "I understand, Doctor." "Thank you," Dr. Samuel sighed. "If you truly regret what you did, then don't cause any more trouble. Don't try to force your way into her life. Let her decide when she is ready." Margaret placed a hand over her heart. "I promise, Doctor. I just want her to know the truth." Dr. Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded. As Margaret walked away, he sat down heavily in his chair, exhaling deeply. The battle was over, but the wounds of the past would take time to heal. And now the biggest question remained. Would Grace ever forgive the mother who abandoned her? The afternoon sun hung high in the sky as Margaret stood outside Samuel's home, her heart pounding. For years she had lived with regret. The shame of her past mistake had eaten her alive, making every day feel like a heavy burden. But now she was here. She had begged Dr. Samuel for forgiveness, and by some miracle he had given her another chance. But Grace, would Grace ever forgive her? Taking a deep breath, Margaret knocked gently on the door. A moment later, the door opened, and there stood Grace. Margaret gasped softly, taking in the sight of the young woman before her. The last time she had seen her, Grace had been a tiny, helpless baby. But now she was grown, beautiful, and strong. And she could see. Margaret's heart ached at the realization of all she had missed. Her daughter had seen the world, had laughed, had lived. Without her. Grace frowned. "Who are you?" Margaret's lips trembled. I am your mother." Silence. Grace's eyes darkened as the words sank in. Margaret swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was wrong. I left you when you needed me the most, and for that I have suffered every single day." Tears filled her eyes. "But please, my child, if there is even a small place in your heart that can find it in you to forgive me, I beg you, let me say I am sorry." Grace stood there, her face unreadable. Her heart felt heavy. This was the woman who had given birth to her, the woman who had abandoned her, the woman who had left her alone in the darkness. And yet, as she looked at her, she saw something else. Pain. Regret. The kind of regret that could never be erased. Grace took a deep breath. Her voice was calm but firm. "I forgive you," she said softly. Margaret's eyes widened. She fell to her knees, her sobs shaking her whole body. "Thank you, my child. Thank you. But then," Grace continued, "I forgive you. But Dr. Samuel and Mary will always be my parents. They are the ones who raised me. They are the ones who loved me when you didn't." Margaret sobbed harder, nodding. "I understand, my child. I don't want to take you away from them. I just wanted to hear you say that one word, forgiveness. Now I can finally breathe again." Grace's heart ached, but she knew she had made the right decision. Forgiveness was not about forgetting. It was about healing. Dr. Samuel and Mary had given her a home, love, and a future. Nothing could change that. But forgiving Margaret allowed her to let go of the bitterness that had been in her heart since she found out the truth. As Margaret stood up, she wiped her tears and looked at Grace one last time. "You are a light, my daughter, a light that I once tried to put out, but God saved you." Grace smiled faintly. "Yes." He did. Margaret turned to leave, and Grace watched as the woman who had given her life walked away. Not as an enemy, not as a stranger, but as a mother who had learned a painful lesson. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.